You know, some people really did like my previous video talking about Yugioh GX, and maybe I'll make more videos talking about specific Yu-Gi-Oh series, but for now, I want to talk about girls. Yugioh Girls.
I'm what is known as a YouTube hobo. I provide no measurable value to society.
Blow it out your ass.
Look, I grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh, and one of the things that I really wish that Yu-Gi-Oh would have done was at least have a female lead protagonist. Yes, I am aware that the series is a shonen one. But it's not like there haven't been shonen series that have female lead protagonists, or kick-ass women at that point. But alas, unless I'm somehow able to get a ton of scratching by the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, that probably ain't gonna happen anytime soon. So let's talk about the girls of Yu-Gi-Oh. If you know me or my channel, you'll more than likely know that this video is going to be a bit on the negative side. And that's because, for the most part, I think Yu-Gi-Oh, for all its charm, has issues with all its female characters, some more than others. I want to cover each generation in its own video, so we'll start with the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. So before we actually begin, this will be a series of videos where I talk about my issues that I have with the anime series Yu-Gi-Oh! And their female leads. And to make things clear, since there are a number of Yu-Gi-Oh! Girls and how that implies I'm talking about main leads, so they have to be part of the main cast, they have to be in more than one episode, and they have to have a part in the main story. Also, spoilers! For all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's begin!
I was almost a human ice pop!
So a lot of my issues with Taya Gardner stem from mostly because what was done for the sake of the anime and the 4Kids dub job. Here's the thing you need to realize with the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, the fact that it ignores the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga, basically the stuff with Season 0. Hell, even that was changed from the original manga because in the original manga you had Yugi vs Usho playing a game of Money and Knife. Damage! And that was changed in the anime version. And with the anime that a lot of people know and love, they essentially ignored all the previously established continuity that came with it. And that really sucks! Especially when you consider that when there was a transition to just focusing on the card game, a good chunk of the cast got hit, notably Tristan and Taya, and it's because they didn't actually play the card game. Even more so that the arcs that had a lot more to do with the characters, Death Tea, Shotties invading the museum, and one of my favorite arcs, Bakura's tabletop RPG. God, those games must have been awesome. He even made custom figurines! Yeah, those arcs had a lot of character development moments for the two, but then something happened. The card game got popular!
I summon Pot of Greed to draw 3 additional cards from my deck!
That's not what it does.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here.
And this was both a good thing and a bad thing for the Yu-Gi-Oh's creator, Takahashi. Good in the case that the man has enough money to the point where he doesn't have to work anymore and make any more manga, and bad because this drastically shifted the original idea of said manga. For those who aren't really in the know, the original concept of Yu-Gi-Oh was that each arc would feature a different game, or would use the games as a means to solve the conflict. Like taking coins from a sneaker that has a live scorpion in it, having people be lit on fire in a maze, and blowing up a high schooler with explosive chemicals in a deadly game of ice hockey. God, Yu-Gi-Oh was fucked up at times!
Oh yeah, that's the stuff!
When even the Japanese are making changes to the materials, you know there's some messed up shit going on. Still not as bad as JoJo, though. But yeah, the series became a lot more restrictive, especially with how both Tristan and Taya weren't really duelists. If Takahashi turned them into duelists, they'd probably blow up the plot even more trying to figure out duels for the two to be in, or write them out of the story completely. Neither option was good, so Takahashi went with another, and that was essentially to turn them into the moral support squad. More notably for Taya, and that's mainly because Tristan basically got to punch Joey. Although, funnily enough, that scene was cut from the dub. So I like to think that this change actively hurt Taya more, since she's not really much in the plot as she was in the original manga concept. Don't get me wrong, she had her share of good scenes, like calling out Kaiba after he threatened to kill himself if he lost in a duel against Yugi. Now, there's nothing wrong with a character becoming a support character in a series, and there were a few times where Taya actually did shine, like when she fought against a penguin that wanted to take over her body in the filler arc. To be frank, Taya wasn't the greatest female character before the change in the series' direction, but it did get worse, like how the anime tried to adapt the tabletop RPG arc into a duel against Bakura, and essentially turned Taya into a damsel in distress that needed to be protected. Same thing happened in Battle City, where she became a damsel in distress again. What also didn't help was that the relationship with Yugi was kinda covered up at times in the dub. Kinda kneecapped that character angle. Thanks, 4Kids!
Oh, by the way, I was being sarcastic.
Really, a lot of the issues that I've seen with people that have with Taya is the whole cheerleader role. Her spouting off friendship speeches and being annoying, but really a lot of those complaints are really blown out of proportion. The problems really came when she was essentially turned to a background noise, and she doesn't really contribute anything to the plot and thus essentially being turned to a girl of the group. Like I said, she has her moments, but they really are few and far between, and most of the time, Taya was pretty boring, which makes it all the more infuriating that she apparently has the best dueling track record of all female duelists. Sure, it was only 2 on-screen duels, but I feel that if your only wins are 1, due to the fact that someone was whipping your tail and you only won because they surrendered, and 2, you essentially breaking the rules of the game using a card from another person's deck who wasn't even in said duel, I don't think those should really count.
This one was invented by a writer.
And there were still moments I found her to be completely stupid. In the original manga, when there's a bomb threat that isn't just a bunch of bright lights flipping people off, she willingly puts herself in danger. A deadly situation just to meet some random guy whose voice she liked so much? Jesus Christ! I'm glad she canonically moved to America at the end of the latest movie. Ugh. Oh my, oh my. Where do we even begin? Look, I like the concept of Mai Valentine, and despite everything I'm about to talk about, I do like how she evolved from a cold-hearted bitch who was willing to cheat her way to the top and became a friendlier person towards the group, even managing to score a ton of awesome points when she helped Joey out in Duelist Kingdom after Bandit Keith stole his entrance card. As a person and character, Mai certainly did manage to grow, and that's something I can really appreciate, especially looking back at the original all these years later. I can appreciate the development that she got as a character, and not just as a teenage guy who liked looking at the beauty in the miniskirt. What? She's 24?
Yes.
Holy shit, an anime girl who's legal and really hot? That's a bloody miracle! Wait. Mai shipped with Joey Wheeler, and there are canonical moments where the two have feelings for each other. How old is Joey? Well, this just got a little creepier. And that's saying something considering what I brought up that goes on in the manga in the last section. The biggest issues I have with Mai is, well, aside from that creepy factor, is the acid dream that was season 4 where she turned emo and went out of character. The Battle City arc where she was turned to a damsel in distress. Yeah, you'll have to get used to me saying that through this series.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
No! Anyway, one of the bigger issues is that most of the time, Mai's duels were usually with her losing. Like, we're told she's a good duelist, and we can see that she is, but she never really in an on-screen duel where she won, save for a filler duelist. We're told and shown that she can win, but we never actually see the duels that she does. And the moment she's on screen, she loses. And as one of the few female duelists in the original series, that's kinda sad! Even more so when she lost to Merrick, which, fun fact, in the anime, it was changed to make her be a lot more competent against the psychopath. In the manga, Merrick barely took any damage from Mai and was dueling circles around her. Also apparently electrocuting her, too! And of course, after that, we had Mai turned into a damsel in distress. Ugh! Bugs!
Yappe.
And after Battle City, well, that was it for her. She never showed up again in the manga, at least not until Yuki Judai brought her up in the GX manga in the background. And in all honesty, that probably would have been the best for her because when the filler arc for the Orichalcos came into play, like I said, she became evil! Mai had a great arc in seasons 2 and 3 when she learns to overcome the loneliness that she had faced most of her life and allowed her to open up to people. And then it's all thrown away in season 4. But hey, she was in black leather, so I guess that's a plus! And as you can imagine, Mai still couldn't win a duel with the ancient power. Joey had to faint for her to win. I do not consider that a win! Then again, I guess you could say the same thing about Joey versus Merrick. And yeah, I still agree with that! And frankly, this is kinda dumb, especially since after the Waking Dragons arc, she was just gone. Like, there were cameos, but no lines of dialogue. Mai never got to apologize, never got to atone, and she never spoke to her supposed friends. What the fuck is this shit? Am I going insane here? Mai went from having a very good, well-paced development to being turned into a damsel and then turned evil and then forgotten about. What the hell happened here? She isn't a character. Serenity is just motivation for Joey to do better and someone for Tristan to lust after. Weather ages again? Twitter better get to canceling again! Seriously though, Serenity is just used as motivation for Joey Wheeler, and after Battle City Finals arc, she's never seen again, save for one part in the final episode. Yay!
How could my Millennium Necklace have been wrong?
You know, every time I talk Yu-Gi-Oh! With my editor, he always brings up something about when we talk about this character.
I fucking hate this moment from the dub! I hate it like the media hates Star Wars fans. Okay, maybe not that bad, but still. In this scene where Kaiba's dueling my chocolate fat stacked pudding wet dream Ishizu, Kaiba pulls out a win when Majin Merrick here with the veiny face has a bit of a heated internet argument with his Millennium Rod. The Rod basically says, "Fuck you, Merrick! You called me a—" insert gamer word here. And then proceeds to show Kaiba his past. Because, you know, Kaiba was the reincarnation of Seto. Seto had the fucking Millennium Rod. Now in the dub, Kaiba goes like a broken fucking record and just keeps repeating how, you know, "I decide my future! I decide my fate!" Ishizu, well, she says the obvious fucking shit and she's all like, "Oh, my Millennium Blink Blink was wrong!" Now in the original, there's only one quote from Kaiba about the future being decided by him. Now in the subtitled original version, he's all like, "The blue-eyes white dragon is my waifu!" Further giving hints to just how linked he is to the past of ancient Egypt. And my Egyptian Queen of the Thick here is actually giving off a sense that she's personally offended by Kaiba sacrificing Obelisk, her fucking roided out, raged out Chad god here, and basically can't believe it in the same way that Genshin Impact waifu stands can't believe that La Signora has gone Betty Bye into the ether of to be revived later when Mihoyo needs money. So now I'm gonna play out the scene for you, just so you know that I'm not shitting you.
手札にあるブルーアイズを召喚するために必要な生贄は2体。そう。神を生贄に捧げる。俺のプライド。そして俺の魂。俺の未来は俺が決める。我がしもべのために生贄となれ。オベリスク、神を生贄に。いでよ、ブルーアイズホワイトドラゴン。
Oh yeah, and also, I also got sick and tired of hearing the dub reuse that same theme song for the gods every time. The one that goes like... I got so sick of hearing... Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Now get the fuck out of here.
So, yeah, she was actually a pretty good duelist. It's a shame that we didn't get to see more of her, and that she had a limited screen time in the show and manga. To be frank, it's pretty awesome to see a sisterly character who not only stole a god card to keep it safe from her deranged brother, and in a sense, it was her fault that the dark side of Merrick came out. That's good character beats. I like that. I'm conflicted with this one. On one end, I was really annoyed with Rebecca Hawkins as a character. It's a little girl who's got a hardcore crush on Yugi. And on the other end, she happens to be a semi-competent duelist. Throwing the fact that she doesn't have a lot of screen time, it's hard for me to really hate the character. Especially when you consider most of her development came from the filler arcs. She's also a smart little girl, and I can always appreciate that archetype.
Dude, you really gotta find a better way to end off these segments.
Look, I know I don't have a lot to say about these last few girls, but that's the thing. There's not a lot to say about them from my point of view, since they don't have a lot of screen time or don't really add much to the plot. Except Ishizu, she was a major part in the Battle City arc and was probably one of the reasons why Battle City was even a thing. I think if there's one thing that I can say about the girls of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, it's that there's wasted potential. While I can understand the complications with Taya when the shift in direction for the series took place, there really shouldn't be the same with the other characters since they were only introduced into the series after the change or became relevant after that. And I know that the easy reason is to say that it's a shonen series, but that really isn't all that simple. Like I said, a lot of these female characters, not just in Duel Monsters but in other series, have sections of writing that are just as good as the male characters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Hell, I can even say that Serenity, whom I consider completely useless, had her moment to shine. The problem is that this just doesn't continue after their time in the spotlight ends, and I think one of the biggest issues is that after these female characters have their moments or arcs, the creators just don't know what to do with them. I think that's what happened to Mai. I'm sure there's an official statement out there or something, but when she had her heel turn in season 4 of the anime, it ignored her character development in earlier chapters, and after that, Mai just disappeared. This is something that we'll see when we get back to the series where I discuss more of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Female characters. But trust me when I say that, funnily enough, the Duel Monster girls actually got off pretty easily comparison to the future girls of the series. Ugh. And if you want to see those issues, let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and be sure to leave a comment. It helps out. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Remember to examine your fandom, and I'm Manga Common. Bye-bye!
To burst your bubble, but
You are gay.
Oh yeah, we're back, baby, talking about the problems with Yu-Gi-Oh! Girls again. And this time we're talking about the second generation of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yugioh GX. I know that I talked about at length of the mistakes of Yugioh GX in a video that I'm surprised did as well as it did, but like with the last video where I talked about the female characters in the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, this will be a more focused video on the topic. But before we begin, I feel like I need to bring up something that caused some concern on my end. Namely, how a few people thought that I was a feminist and trying to cancel the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Did I just hear someone use a microaggression?
No! Yeah, no joke, I had some dumbasses actually accuse me of that. Because, yeah, making a joke at feminist frequencies expense apparently means I'm a total feminist. Nowhere in my video did I state I wanted to cancel Kazuki Takahashi. Even if I did, the guy's probably got enough fuck you money not to give a rat's ass about what some measly YouTuber has to say in the West. Plus, Japan doesn't really seem to care in general what Americans think of their products, especially if they're decades old at this point. So, for the people who apparently lost their frontal lobe, I'm merely talking about the female characters because while I do like Yu-Gi-Oh!, it has problems when it comes to its writing. This isn't me saying that I want to cancel the series, or that I think that the writing is offensive. I'm just a dude on the net who likes anime girls and likes talking about characters in general, and who talks about nerd shit. Don't read too much into it. So, get your game...
I'm what is known as a YouTube hobo. I provide no measurable value to society.
And he do wee woo wee woo.
Blow it out your ass.
he's a lot of booty.
I beg your pardon?
Shock of all shocks, before we get to the actual named characters of GX, I do want to point out something that's always bugged me about the series, and that's most of the female background characters are all in Obelisk Blue's dorm. For those unaware, Obelisk Blue is known as the best of the best out of 3 dorms. Aside from the 2 female characters in the first episode wearing what appears to be raw yellow uniforms, we never see any of the girls wearing other than blue. With the sole exception of Ray, but that's a special case. Don't get me wrong, I love blue miniskirts as much as the next guy, but from a writing perspective, it's utterly baffling. Why does every girl on the island get stuck in Obelisk Blue? You know, the best dorm and the highest level you can have in Duel Academy? What kind of message are you trying to say, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, that if you're a girl you get a free ride to the top of the food chain?
Yes.
Not to sound like one of those losers that complains about women, but this always bugged me that we never saw any of the other girls in red or yellow, because I don't know about you, but I like to think that varying skills would be appropriate. Apparently though, and this is from the official wiki page, the reason for this is because the lower two dorms do not have the appropriate housing, as Obelisk Blue is the only one with a separate dormitory for both female and male students. Which, fair enough I suppose. I still question why raw yellow doesn't, because there's a big building that can be cut in two. I've been in dorms before, but I suppose when you've got an island full of teenagers, the possibility of hormones acting up would make this a dangerous game to play. But it really makes me question where all the funds Duel Academy is getting are going to. And while there is a reason for this, it creates another issue. If you watched my video on Yugioh GX, you'd know that I messed with my editor's editing. That was actually pretty good. Sorry, Kaiser.
Fuck you! You disgusting little pig! You make me sick!
You can't show a person being killed, especially in a show that's being shown to kids. Although, I don't know, maybe put like a Dragon Ball Z clip here.
Oh my god!
You can't show a person being killed, especially in a show that's being shown to kids. Although...
Master, help us! It's me, Daddy! Father!
Yup, that's him alright.
I don't know, maybe put like a Dragon Ball Z clip here.
Oh my god!
Look what you did to my masterpiece. You will rue the day you cross the dark side.
But you'd also know that the Obelisk Blues are pretty stuck up and pompous because of the color that they wear, and this does also apply to some of the female students. Not that we get a lot of dialogue with female students outside the main group or related to them, but it is there. So what I'm getting at is that regardless of skill, girls are automatically put into the best dorm, get the best treatment, and get the status of Obelisk Blue. Meanwhile, the guys, especially the guys who suck at schoolwork or dueling, are stuck eating sardines and living in a shack. Seriously, how hasn't Duel Academy and Seto not been slapped with multiple lawsuits at this point?
Money.
Now, from a practical standpoint, there is a reason why you mostly see blue girls. It's because they probably just didn't want to spend time making extra background female models when it has been determined that the main female cast member was going to be from the blue dorm. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of fanfiction I once read. Yes, I used to read fanfiction. Judge me all you want, let's keep going. I remember that there was an Osiris Red student that went around beating a ton of Obelisk Blue girls. Not because he was sexist, but to show the inherent sexism that had been putting in female students in Obelisk Blue when they may not necessarily have the prerequisite skills to go there. Makes a lot of sense to me, really. What does it say about the standards of the academy if they're willing to promote students who don't really fit the standards for their best dorm or even allow them to graduate to the top of their class? If this slifer slacker can beat so many so-called top dorm students, what does it say about the Academy's standards? To be fair, that's also the point of Yuki Judai's character, since he beat a ton of Obelisk Blue characters, but it's this kind of stuff that gets you thinking. Hell, most of the male Obelisk Blues were there because they come from rich families that got to go to prep schools ahead of time. Then again, I'm just wasting my time talking about this. These people aren't really relevant. At least most of them. They're just background characters, but I still thought it was at least interesting to talk about. Then again, I'm digging way too deep into an anime that's about 2 decades old at this point.
I like it, Kaji.
Asuka Tenjoin. Probably one of my earlier anime crushes. And it saddens me that I do have to talk about her in a negative light, but alas, there are problems with the writing with her. I do want to say at the beginning that we actually do have a very interesting character beat with Asuka. Her brother was missing, and she was looking to find information about his disappearance. Granted, she didn't do a whole lot of looking, but it was still an interesting character beat, and hey, looking at her solo dueling track record, it's not terrible. 5 wins, 5 losses. I don't count the flashbacks or tag duels for this. So, she's got an average dueling record. Granted, you could also point out some duels we don't actually see and that she has to lose off-screen, but whatever. Asuka is portrayed as one of the best female duelists on the island, and considering my complaints with Obelisk Blue, I can actually believe that. However, if you've ever seen the previous video or can read the title, you know for a fact that there's issues with Asuka's character. The first is the character beat I brought up. It only lasts for about the first half of Season 1. Doesn't really get any actual highlights to it, and her brother's found as he's the first of the bad guys called the 7 Stars. And yes, I refer that to the Shadow Riders because it sounds a hell of a lot cooler. And after that, well, Asuka practically becomes the girl of the group. There's not a lot for me to really say about her, and that kind of sucks because, like I said, I like Asuka. Like, there's a real cute moment that sticks out in my mind where she's dressed up as Harpy Lady. And you got her brother, Fubuki, taking a picture of her, and she begins chasing him around trying to get that photo back. And I really like that. That's an extremely lovable and realistic interaction between siblings. It really shows the relationship between the two, and it's actually a pretty nice parallel between the sibling relationship between Sho and Ryo.
Crippling depression.
Who have a more stoic and, dare I say, colder sibling relationship. I really wish there was a lot more scenes like this between the two, as it really breaks Asuka out of her more composed character beats. But she essentially doesn't do all that much after her brother is found in Season 1, with the exception of dueling Titan and then dueling Manjomi, who's attempting to court her by stealing the keys that kept 3 demon cards in place. Manjomi, I love you, bro, but you're an idiot! Season 2 doesn't get much better. Honestly, the more important aspects of Asuka's character before the cult of White takes over are... she moves to the Red Dorm because she doesn't want to be a pop idol. Again, this is probably the best thing I like about Asuka as a character. And it has more to do with her brother wanting her to join him being a pop idol duo. We're really shown a more human side of Asuka's character. She's essentially embarrassed by her brother. I don't know why she would. He seems like a really fun guy, and hey, he's got plenty of girls lusting after him.
What the?
I do wish we could have gotten more interactions between the two, because there really isn't a lot more to Asuka's as a character outside of it. There's not any actual development that she goes through. Although, then we get to... the Society of Light. You know, this is probably going ahead too much, but this is something that I've noticed with a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh girls, especially the main leads. If you pay attention, you'll realize there's a trend of them getting mind-controlled at one point or another. Anzu was controlled by Merrick, Asuka was brainwashed by Sayo in the Society of Light, Aki has her mind controlled by Divine at one point, Kotere was controlled a few times if I recall, and don't get me started on Arc V. Not yet! I seriously have to wonder if there's one guy who's been a part of the development of all these shows who seems to have a thing for hypnotizing young girls. It's kinda creepy, not gonna lie. And then we get to Season 3.
The one time I forget to pack my bikini.
I've raved about GX in my video about that series and my distaste for Season 3, where the characters that we've had for up to 2.5 years get killed off because there was a surplus of characters. And shock of all shocks, the same applies to Asuka here, and thus her development in Season 4 was extremely rushed, and that in and of itself was divided too. One half, you got Asuka being afraid of what she should do with her future, and being afraid that if she takes a teaching job that she'll suck at it. Then again, that's mostly just when she's floating around the dark void. She's seen the universe. The other half, and more prominent line, is her not liking Judai's personality change after Season 3. Basically straining her friendship with Judai. I mean, when you think that one of your friends dragged your injured brother into a duel that actively hurts him, then yeah, that is kind of an issue. And yes, nitpickers, I am aware that Fubuki is the one who wanted a duel, but that's beside the point. During Season 4, it was clear that Asuka was nostalgic for the previous years, and with Judai changing, it really shows then when they tag duel, with Judai basically just using her cards, and in turn just using her. Symbolically, it's really good, but I don't know, there's something that really gets under my skin with this. Maybe it's because Asuka is discounting the sheer hell that Judai went through in Season 3 that ranges from people being erased. Yes, Viper was killed. Seeing his friends essentially die before his eyes, becoming an evil king that enacted genocide, and infusing with Yubel, a living ball of angst that I'm not even sure I should include in this video because I'm not sure if they're a guy or a girl somewhere in between. I would think that if someone wouldn't change from dealing with that stuff, that they are a designated psychopath. My point is, Asuka, you've got a taste of what Judai had to deal with. Trauma like that doesn't disappear, and it can change a person drastically. And sometimes it's for the very worst. To be clear, Yugioh GX is a lot different from the Duel Monsters counterpart, for a number of reasons. Initially, there wasn't a manga counterpart that the writers could pull from. And since Takahashi was probably swimming in dough because of how popular the card game was, they couldn't turn to his work, even though he did actually work on it in some degree. Fun fact, he does have a small role in some of the manga adaptations of Yu-Gi-Oh! Granted that it has its own problems, but I like the GX manga. A lot, really. I kind of prefer it over the anime, but we're not here to talk about the manga, we're here to talk about the girls of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. And now, we get to the other one.
Alright, I
think she gets the point. She's about to get jazzed. I hope they cancel this show.
Sorry, I was talking about something meaningless when we should have been talking about Rei, who is also meaningless. Again, I expressed very deeply about why I dislike Rei as a character in GX when I made my original video. Not only for the fact that she's basically a useless character outside of being a damsel in distress in the 3rd season, which, fun fact, she doesn't even accompany the rest of the group into the other worlds when they leave. She basically adds nothing to the story outside of that. You could remove her from the plot and you basically wouldn't lose much. Not helped is the fact that this character design is supposed to be that of an 11-year-old.
13.
Meanwhile, in English dub, she's apparently started off 8.5, so she's barely 10. Ugh, what kind of crack were they smoking with this kind of decision at 4 kids? Thing is, Rei started off as a pretty inoffensive character. She had a crush on Ryo Marufuji, the guy who apparently is allowed to shower on screen, and then snuck into Duel Academy disguised as a boy in order to get close to him. That's a neat beat for a character, and very interesting considering the lengths she was willing to go. And hey, for what is essentially a one-off filler episode, it wasn't bad. The problem was they really didn't do a whole lot with her when she came back, with the exception of the aforementioned damsel in distress and having a connection to a depressive guy named Martin, who acts as a meat puppet for Yubel, the main antagonist of Season 3 that I brought up earlier, which, I mean, I can understand why Martin is depressed. Imagine if you're the son of this melted blob of French pastries. I'd be depressed if I knew I had that guy's genes inside me too. Back to Rei, for some reason she gets promoted to Obelisk Blue. Well, ain't that just peachy? I think what my biggest issue with Rei is the same issue I got with GX as a whole. There's just too many characters, and here's the thing, they had other characters who could have filled up the role of another girl in the group. I mean, aside from Junko and Momo, who are basically nothing more than walking, talking statues that act like Asuka's friends, and in the dub they're nothing more than the typical Valley girls, they could have, I don't know, actually given a personality outside of wanting to like boys and being a cheer squad. Or if you didn't want to do that, there were a few other one-shot female duelists who could have made up for a much more interesting inclusion into the main cast, like Alice, who's essentially a haunted doll that came to life to punish duelists that treated weak cards like trash. I mean, she certainly is a lot more interesting of a character via the premise alone than Rei is. Granted, I'm just a YouTuber with my big dumb YouTuber brain. I can only speculate on how things could have been done 20 years ago in an anime about card games. So this is mostly just a waste of time, much like my life.
The one I crave is coming.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 worst movie accents.
Before I start unpacking the thing that is Yubel, I want to point out that there really aren't a lot of female villains in Yugioh GX. In the first season, you had the vampire Camula. I do love me a good bath scene. Aside from some, I guess, passable fan service, Camula was actually a pretty competent antagonist. She actively sat on her bats to survey the duelists to learn about their decks. She was actually pretty competent in dueling and even had her own little win streak. Yeah, she used a broken card that would have stolen the soul of anyone she wanted, but she's still a bad guy, and it's expected that she'd pull some stunt like that. Hell, Camula only loses to Judai because he managed to pull a brand new hero that she didn't see. And then she got her own soul sucked out because of the shadow charm that Judai just happened to have. You know, now that I think about it, the students that did beat the 7 stars took the shadow charms, but we never actually got to see what happened to those mythical items that can turn people into dolls, bring back the dead, and can turn tigers into muscle-bound ladies. Wait, what? Oh yeah, Tanya. I'm of two minds with Tanya. On one hand, she's a muscular Amazon gal who can kick my ass, but on the other hand, she's actually a tiger. Yeah, she's not a bad villain per se, but in comparison to Camula, she's not as prominent, even when she does beat Misawa. Fun fact, later in the season, we see Misawa dressed up as Amazona's tiger. God, Misawa, you are such a simp!
No, she would never, not my Tanya.
Okay.
Also, fun side fact, in the manga adaptation of GX, Misawa actually has a crush on Asuka, to the point where he is actually jealous that Judai has Asuka's phone number and email address. I really need to make a series talk about how to fix some characters, but back on topic, there's also Mizuchi, the younger sister of Sayo, the main antagonist of Season 2 Society of Light. Again, this is a character that doesn't get too much screen time, so it's hard for me to really talk about her character. We're first shown that she's cold and calculating, willing to punish her subordinates even when they actually manage to succeed. She tests both Judai and Edo to see if they can help her brother be freed from the gestalt horror that is the Light of Destruction. And after she gets digitized into the cyber world, she's somehow uploaded into the satellite that would be used to fire lasers to brainwash the world, and said satellite was destroyed by...
Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
A spiritual T-Rex version of Hasselberry and the Guyver hero Neos. I love this batshittery. But I really don't have an issue with Mizuchi, at least not until season 4, where she's captured by the world of darkness and used to force Sayo to fight Judai in a duel to the death, with bombs placed inside Kaiba Corporation. I mean, she's just basically used as a tool for this, but again, we don't spend a lot of time with her, so I don't know what to say about her. Nor do I have an issue with her.
You summon regenerating Rhodes in attack mode. It's beautiful, but it's got thorns.
By thorns, do you mean 0 attack point?
Yeah, no shit, Sherlock.
Okay, we get to the clusterfuck that is Yubel. How is Yubel a clusterfuck? Let's start with the fact I don't even know if they're a full-on girl. I mean, look at this! You got a combination of both masculine and feminine traits with Yubel's body. Even if you go back to their backstory, I can't tell if they're a guy or a girl. I assume guy, but that's really stretching it. Honestly, Yubel is a topic that should warrant their own video because there's a lot to dissect about this character. Like talking about they represent the alchemy and fusion themes of the series, or how I think Yubel is super creepy and obsessive, which, while bad without context, as a villain is a great angle. Not to mention Yubel does the job really well messing with the main cast, basically making Judai break and is a pretty good duelist. I may make a video talking more about Yubel, but I think what makes me dislike Yubel isn't because of her character, but because of how the concept of her really makes the story of the anime even more batshit insane than I think even I can handle. Like in Season 3, not only is Yubel capable of possessing people, kills people, made Johan and Judai shippers more and more fuel for their shipping. Oh, and apparently, this makes Judai the descendant of an ancient king long ass time ago. You know, while I can appreciate the idea of lore like this, GX made fun of this concept in the first season.
Think we were somehow connected to each other in some ancient life, Jaden? You know, like you were an Egyptian pharaoh and I was the guardian Seto? No offense, but that's just lame.
I agree with Dub Judai, that is just lame. I get that GX is balls to the wall insane with concepts, as many people in the comments section of my video told me, but apparently missed that I actually liked that. But a lot of this stems from something that I'm still searching for, so take what I say next with a grain of salt. Since from what I understand, the Supreme King plotline along with Yubel was to fill a problem with Judai's character. Namely because with Judai's happy-go-lucky character who basically won every fight he was in, there wasn't a place for his character to go, so Yubel was created to bring out the dark and desperate side of Judai's character. It was to show what would happen if Judai continued to bring his friends with him into dangerous situations and lost, because according to an interview with Kazuki Takahashi in the Duel art book, Judai's attitude was difficult to show growth in, and stated that his personality would not be enough to beat someone like Yami Merrick. Granted, I disagree with this notion. For one thing, I can't actually confirm if this quote is something that Takahashi actually said. I'm not shelling $18,000 for this. And frankly, I don't trust a lot of websites that are allowing the downloads of this product, nor do I speak Japanese to confirm this. Another thing, not only has Judai actually lost in the past, like to Kaiser and Edo, he's actually seen what's happened to people when they lose serious duels, and has been in duels where they have been completely serious, his duel against Camula being a prime example of this. Thirdly, it wasn't until Season 3 that Judai actually dragged anyone to danger with him. I get that it was a plot point that people would go after Judai, but if that was the case, you really didn't need Yubel to push that or make an overly complicated plot to have Judai wake up to serious nature of dueling in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! He'd already been experiencing that even as soon as episode 4 of the series. Judai didn't think every duel was fun. His friends were put in danger multiple times, whether it was because of some goon who was hired by a teacher to get him out of the academy, his friends being held hostage over lava, or his friends being turned into dolls. Hell, I'd even say that his happy-go-lucky attitude being a detriment to his character is bullshit. And to say why, I'm gonna bring up a quote from Ace Attorney. A lawyer is someone who smiles no matter how bad it gets. No, Judai isn't a lawyer, although it would be fun to see courtrooms dueling. But the same principle applies here. No matter how terrible a situation is, a positive attitude can help people get through dark times. And the way this quote is being made, it seems like the only way to beat someone like Yami Merrick was through pure seriousness.
If I look past the fact that he's just like really cool and edgy,
I don't agree with that. Smiling in the face of adversity is actually a pretty admirable trait. And the way this quote and information I found says this, it's made out to be like Judai was ignorant of his actions and consequences. Judai is an idiot, yes! But he's not ignorant of the consequences of duels he may lose, and he certainly didn't treat every duel he was in as a simple game. Then again, I can't prove if this is something that was actually said, so I don't know. I'm just complaining for the sake of complaining. Give me money! Getting back to Yubel, if this really was the reason for Yubel's inclusion, then I have to say I don't agree with that notion at all. Granted, that being said, I do appreciate that Yubel as a character can be an interesting case. Showing the mentality of, I hurt people I love because it's the only way I know how to show affection. That's messed up, it's deep stuff, and it's interesting to watch. Regardless of my issues I have with Yubel, and this video won't be able to do it justice since my thoughts are more complicated than, this character is bad, or this character is good. And that's just talking about the Japanese sub version. The dub version is another beast entirely. So if you guys want to see a video dedicated to Yubel, and as a litmus test, comment, come play with me, Jaden, down below.
Are we cringing yet?
On a side note, I really hate the dubbed version of this scene. Like, do you really need Yubel to glow purple here?
Yes.
Really? Honestly, in my humble opinion, the girls of GX, well, Asuka really, got off a bit better than in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Granted, there wasn't anything overly terrible about them, save for Rei's age, but by that same token, there's not a lot that makes them stand out either. Then again, this goes to the core of GX's problems, where only Judai is the one who's capable of saving the day. Sure, some of the other characters get their wins, but a lot of the time the duels tend to be inconsequential to the main story of the series. But hey, after this, we're now shifting into Turbo next time, and talking about my second favorite series of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and their girls. And how they took probably one of the best, most interesting female characters and replaced her with one of the blandest generic characters of all time. Fuck you, Crow! I'm Hugger, thanks for watching and have a nice day! Hello boys and girls, we finally got to the point of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and I'm gonna be honest, 5Ds is probably my second favorite of the series. I know it's a bit contentious since some people believe that the introduction of synchro monsters are what led the game to becoming a cluster, but in all honesty I don't fully agree with that. Yes, synchro summoning did speed up the game, but considering that the game up to that point had a lot of limitations and how slow some strategies were, I felt it was a good inclusion to add a new card type. The problem lies with how Konami really didn't think things through. But we're not here to talk about how Konami constantly abused its player base over and how some duelists that I faced in the past lack the ability to shower. We're here to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds and the girls within it.
Yes! Big city, here we come!
As a side note, I will be expecting some level of familiarity with the series, and if you want some more context, I would suggest checking out my video on Aki Izayoi, as I give a basic summary of the world and plot. So, rev up that D-wheel and let's get into it! As I said before, I hope that at least some of you watched my Aki video and how good of a character setup she had. If you haven't seen the video, please go watch it. Now! Pause this video and watch it. You need to understand why Aki was a good character and how the show massively messed it up. Like, it's not even a betrayal of her character or that she became a damsel in distress. It's more like she became a bench warmer. Hell, that's her title in the credits and later in the show. Not get me wrong, there are times where Aki does take the show again, like with her D-Wheel license exam. And, going on a date with Yusei?
Can do anything, especially math.
Sure, she gets to duel in the World Racing Grand Prix once Crow gets benched after an injury, but soon after that... Yeah, there were some other things, but I'm not going to go over all of them, as my issue with the second half of 5Ds is that there was a lack of direction and overall development for Aki in the series. It's a problem that we'll be seeing more and more when we get to future series, but I need to cover something that is related to this specific one. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's production was messy, and because of that, there was a lot of production issues. Not helped that the ratings for the show weren't all that great. Hell, reruns of Yugioh GX in Japan were beating 5Ds into the ground. One day, I'll have to talk about 5D's production in more detail, but I'll say this, it's because of what happened with 5Ds that Zexel took a more—
Remember the guy who showed me all those shortcuts to school and taught me how to burp the alphabet? That guy was awesome!
child-friendly direction. There have been a lot of rumors talking about why Aki's role was diminished, and there are 3 popular rumors about that I want to address. The first is that Fuck You Crow was uplifted from being a villain into the 3rd lead protagonist role due to the fact that his archetype Black Wings was really popular at the time, and thus took the place of Aki. But there are a few big problems with that. The first is that from what I've seen, there's been no official statement issued that this was the case. It's always been a fandom theory. Let's take a moment to look at the time frames. Crow's debut was episode 30, which aired October 22nd, 2008. The first set of Black Wing cards came out in Crimson Crisis, which was released in Japan on November 15th, 2008. Only 3 weeks afterwards. I don't think that was the reason. I do think Crow was initially supposed to be a villain since the design does have that twist to it, but for this rumor, I do not believe that to be the case. The time does not lead up to it, because if you know anything about animation, it takes more than a few weeks to make a 22-minute animation. The second rumor has to do with a real-world cult, and how one of the voice actors for Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds was associated with, and there was some drama that went along with that.
Oh! Okay! In that case, do you think you could elaborate?
And if you know anything about Japan's culture, they did have an issue with cults. And since there was a cult-like element in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, they had to be changed to a more sci-fi element that was the Ishtar. That's why you got this lovely scene. Yeah, I'm not kidding about that. But again, this is not on the side of the rumor. The cult in question was the Roma Sophie cult, with their leaders being arrested in September 2010, and the voice actress who was associated with the cult was revealed shortly after. To be specific with episodes, this would be around episode 127. However, the introduction of the 3 Ishtar members were revealed in episode 65, which was in 2009. Sherry LeBlanc's introduction, a character I'll get to later in this video, was introduced in episode 71, also in 2009, as well as the World Riding Grand Prix, which had already been established well before the outing of the cult's association with a single voice actress. So, no, evil cults didn't have anything to do with the mech Lords happening. The series was already on the path for over a year before the information came out. And finally, the final reason for why Aki's character development was removed from the second half was, yeah, remember I'm talking about Aki here? The third rumor would be because her voice actress, Ayumi Kinoshita, was pregnant at the time.
Excuse me, the fuck did you just say?
Which is, a really stupid rumor. Again, unless the gods of time are friggin' messing with me again, that's not possible. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's run was from 2008 to 2011. Ayumi got married in 2012, and her kid was born in 2014. I'm willing to bet that someone decided to make this up. People thought it was possible, and no one bothered to even check to see if it was true. You know, something that the internet loves to do on a regular basis? Now, you may be wondering, but comment! What is the reason behind Aki's writing in Season 2? Well, I'm not a mind reader. I can't claim to know the specific reason myself, but my own personal theory is
Internet, welcome to
the writers simply didn't know what to do with her. This is a trend in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I suppose you can say this for a lot of writing in media, and not just exclusive to female characters either, but specifically for Yu-Gi-Oh! The writers will sideline female characters regardless of their popularity, how they're related to the plot, how their skills, or how interesting they are. Hell, if you ask me, Aki's probably the least offender in this entire series. That belongs to someone else! Aki is never fully written out because she's a signer. She survived the entire series and still had a few duels to her name that were entertaining at the very least in the second half. The reason I believe is the structure of the second half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, i.e. the WRGP. It's essentially a tournament arc that has a very terrible structure where it's a 3-on-3 tag team tournament. And in a tournament arc, it has a lot of restrictions on what can and can't be told, especially when you consider that these are all riding duels and no ground duels. And the 3-on-3 aspect is essentially 3 duels in the same round back to back. That's going to eat a lot of time and episodes. The second half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is riddled with plot lines that go nowhere fast, and a lot of the plot hooks for Aki were wrapped up by the end of the Dark Signer arc. Her family issues were resolved, Aki's powers were in control, her insanity was dealt with, and Divine, the character who was essentially the manipulator of Aki, well... he got arrested by the cops! What, you think I'm joking? Nah, he survived that. Yeah, he survived being eaten by a giant newt. Turns out in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 10th Anniversary animation book, it was confirmed that he was revived after that and was arrested promptly. Point is, he was gone. There wasn't anything for Aki to really do after that, as most of the plot hooks had already been spent, save for having a crush on Yusei. Aki was made into a benchwarmer because the writers had no clue what to do with her. The format they chose for the next season limited what they could tell and who they could tell it with an addition on who the leads of the show were. So yes, I can say, fuck you, Crow! Especially when you consider Katsumi Ono, a director of the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds and Arc 5 anime. He seems to have a really good heart-on for Crow, to the point where he's a returning character in Arc 5. While I don't have proof of this, I certainly wouldn't be surprised with this, knowing how much we know about him and his connection with Crow. And unfortunately, the reason why I spent so much time on talking about the issues and rumors about Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is because this affects the rest of the female characters that I'm going to be talking about. Do you want to know what I would have done if I was in the writing staff? Well, I doubt they let some stupid American like myself in there, but there are things you could have done with Aki. Like, while Aki could have forgiven herself for her transgressions when she was lashing out with her psychic powers, her past could still haunt her. After all, she was the Black Rose Witch, who did hurt a ton of people, and that just disappeared. Her arc in season 2 could have been her redemption in showing that she was a different person and trying to help those that she potentially hurt. Hell, how Divine become a stalker of her? Why not? The guy did survive, and it's obvious that that level of evil wouldn't stop his evil plans from making a psychic army, and still have the inclusion of other characters to show their bonds, which was a theme in the show, would help them all get through harder times. And not just when the big bads would attack. Heck, there's a duel where Yusei faces off against a professor of Duel Academy who's barking at the kids who are attending the classes, and they're using low-level cards as to why they're failing. Have Aki duel him instead of Yusei. She's a student of the academy and could have shown that she's capable of instilling lessons into the younger generation and show a change of how she was in the first season, since back in season 1 she was a bit of a loner, save for having Divine with her. And using the kid cards like Yusei originally did in the episode to form her Synchro Dragon would have been a great way to show that she's opened up to other people. Just some ideas on how to do this to flesh out her character and what could have been done in season 2. Well, I suppose I can't complain too much. At least she had a character. Man, if you thought Aki got burned in the plot, at least she had development and character arcs. The other female signer of the group, Ruka, aka Luna, well, she's not even important enough to have a last name. Ruka is a signer, which if you didn't watch my Aki video where I talked about what signers were, consider them essentially the chosen ones who have a connection to each other, where they defend the world from a great catastrophe and they have a dragon monster that happens to be a synchro monster. Ruka is not a character! I mean, that's all I can really say about her. She's more of a side character, especially when you consider that her brother Rua, or Leo, gets more focused throughout the entire show. Ruka was a prop. None of her duels showed any development or progression of what little her character was, and her brother was the main focus of the two. Hell, the duel that she's supposed to be a part of against the Dark Signers, the evil guys in the first season, is actually being done by her brother for the most part. Meanwhile, she's in what appears to be the spirit world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters. Yeah, she can see and interact with dual spirits, which, you know, I should explain, but I'm not gonna because this barely comes up in the series after this. She's just there to help Rua become a character. Hell, she's even a damsel in distress at multiple times throughout the series, and is only there to help Rua's development. I don't know what to tell ya. Ruka barely has a character. She's nice, she's caring, but she doesn't even have an arc. She's just there to make Rua look good. And what sucks is she's a signer. She doesn't even have a deck theme in the show. Yusei, Yusei, Junk, Jack, Arcfiends, Aki, Roses, Rua, Morphtronic, and fuck you Crow, Blackwings. Hell, even in the dub, they basically just tell us that she's a dueling prodigy. Too bad we barely see her doing that. Heck, the manga did a better version of making her an interesting character, since she had that whole vibe of being a creepy little girl that was possessed by an evil spirit, and her brother was just basically trying to help her. At least you had something interesting going on with her character in that. Oh well, c'est la vie! You know, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds actually had quite a few mature characters thrown into the mix, and sure, we had Ishizu in the original series, but she was more fantastical than everyday. Not to mention she only showed up every once in a while. That's when we got Harley Nagisa, a journalist in Neo Domino City who's actually pretty important to the plot in the first chapter, especially in concerns with Jack Atlas. Hell, she was actually pretty cute with Jack, since there was a lot of scenes with her and Jack hanging out. Heck, the first time they meet, Carly is actually helping Jack fight against a possessed security guard. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Carly was a journalist who was trying to get a scoop by interviewing Jack, after he lost his title of King of Duels and was essentially outed for being from Satellite. And given the fact the class system where people from Satellite are seen as scum, criminals, or serfs, it really turned Jack Atlas into a social pariah.
History's greatest monster!
And this is where Carly came into play. After the duel with the mind-controlled security member, Carly took Jack to her home where he could lay low, with the express purposes of wanting to write an article to save her career as a journalist. However, as Carly got to know Jack a bit more, and with the two going on a date since Jack was essentially a freeloader, Carly actually helped Jack understand that he needed to be true to himself after he was essentially used and tossed away. I'm really truncating this stuff, but it was actually pretty interesting, and not only did Jack turn a new leaf to become a better person than he was before, but so did Carly, where she vowed that she wouldn't write an article that would hurt people. And after a duel where Yusei, the main character, was fighting against someone who was essentially killed by him, Jack had to push Carly away. Not only because was it dangerous because of the Dark Signers, but also because if the truth of what was going on with the Signers got out, the head honchos would essentially throw her in jail for the rest of her days to keep the truth from getting out. Unfortunately, Jack had really touched Carly's soul, and she couldn't get him out of her mind, so she decided to look into another Signer that was still in Neo Domino, Aki, and in turn the organization she was a part of, the Arcadia Movement. This would be her biggest mistake though.
Carly.
Normally, this is the part where you'd have people who don't really know 5Ds and would complain about, "Oh, women in refrigerators! She's being used for character development for Jack because she died!" Since, yeah, Carly's death does actually play into Jack Atlas's development later in the first half of 5Ds. But here's the twist! She becomes one of the dangerous Dark Signers, even developing a secondary demented personality, and her opponent that she's going after is none other than Jack himself. It's a pretty intense duel too, and there's even a part where Jack thought he lost it and became a Dark Signer himself. He knocked himself out of it though, and told Carly that he was selfish and would hurt his friends, but Carly had shown him the light before this all happened. I could go on about this, but I'm sure my editor is ready and willing to stab me if I keep going on and on, but the point is, Carly was a fleshed out character, had a real good setup, and even had a great chemistry with Jack. I really liked this character development. It was good. Now you're probably wondering, well, Common, what's the problem? It's the goddamn second half of the series! After the Dark Signer arc, Carly's role in the story was diminished more and more until she essentially became a gag character and was eventually known as a Jack girl. I don't know the official term, but it's essentially the role that all three of Jack's romantic options that were used for the lowest form of comedy. Along with Carly, we've got Mikage, who was a secretary who fell in love with Jack, and Stephanie, who is a random waitress at a cafe that Jack likes to order overly pricey coffee at. I will not be talking about these two because one of them practically gets the same treatment as Carly, while the other is a nobody that just was created for the sake of giving Jack a harem. To be frank, the second half of 5Ds really did a number on Jack, Carly, hell, almost all the other characters, essentially turning Jack into a comic relief character. Hell, I'd even say that it kind of walks back on the development that Jack and Carly went through.
But, that's $30! Yes, but it makes you feel like a million. By the way, I'm a little light today. Do you mind picking up the tab for this one, buddy?
Kill me now! Oh, and by the way, remember that cult I brought up during Aki's portion? Yeah, that was Carly's VA. that was part of the cult. But as I stated, that had nothing to do with the problems of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's writing issues. Next! Misty Lola. She's probably going to be the most positive I'll say about our Yu-Gi-Oh! Girl in this entire series.
That's a damn shame.
Since there aren't a lot of problems with her character. And she's not in the second half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D, so they can't really mess up that character. Also really helps they made her in a fashion model and really smoking hot, so I'm not complaining. Her story is actually really tragic, and her motivations are pretty clear-cut. She's a woman who's out for revenge against Aki because she believed Aki was the cause of her brother's death, Toby. Toby's body was found later, and the shock of losing her only living family caused Misty to crash her car, and as she was about to die, she was turned to a dark signer to live again. It's a simple motivation, but there's nothing really wrong with her as a character, and heck, when she's learned the truth of her brother's death was at the hands of Divine, not only did she take the proper revenge, she tried to surrender while she was dueling Aki. Honestly, if I had to restretch any complaint about Misty, it'd just be her design. Not that it's bad, but with her hair color and style, she really has too much of a resemblance to Carly, at least to me. But again, that's just me, and it's a complaint that I admit is really paltry. Hey, look at that! I'm not being negative in these video series. How long will that last? Apparently not long enough. Sherry LeBlanc. Probably one of the biggest wastes of potential that Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's had as a character.
They're the same picture.
So let me set the stage. You got this badass biker challenging Yusei Fudo after he was kidnapped. And during the duel, this biker removes their helmet, revealing that they're this beautiful blonde French woman whose bike is a motorcycle that looks like a horse and runs knights in her deck. She's got a mystery plot where she's trying to find the creeps who killed her parents over a card. She's willing to attack the big bads with her motorcycle as a weapon. And to top it off, you legit had the makings of a love triangle between her, Yusei, and Aki, with flags of, well... Gotta love the blush. But yeah, you had all of this potential, and a character who was explaining the thrills of ride duels, the main gimmick of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, showcasing the thrills of this type of dueling in an interesting visual. But yeah, you have all of this setup, all of this intrigue, and may have awakened something in the fans of this show. So, how do you F it up? Well, you barely do anything with the character! And then in episode 117, you essentially cut her from the plot for about 14 episodes.
Bye, have a great time.
Have her join the bad guys who are trying to bring a city down on Neo Domino City to stop global destruction that occurs in the future. And she now wants to kill Yusei Fudo, the main character. What the fuck is going on? Yeah, I kinda got a lot of problems here. Again, my thought process with what happened here was with the basic setup of the plot for this season. It's hard to make a lot of good stories when you've got so many limitations strapped to this plot.
By the way, I'm a little light today. Do you mind picking up the tab for this one, buddy?
So, after all this, what do I have to say about the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's girls? It's a lot of missed potential, a lot of screwed up ideas, and frankly, I think there's a bit too many characters. Like, it's not to the same extreme that Yugioh GX had with its writing that I had problems with, but in a way it's even worse because of the inclusion of a tournament arc. So let me say this. The idea of the World Riding Grand Prix can work. A tournament consisting of teams would be great because it'd give a chance to have everyone shine. But the problem was that the main character syndrome kicked in. Practically the entire tournament was a giant wank fest for Yusei Fudo since he practically won every match he was in. He was the guy who managed to save the day every time. And I get that he's the main character, but when you have a team of characters, they shouldn't be brushed off to the side. It's called Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, not 1Y. God, that was a horrible pun. And it's not just the girls that were given terrible treatment in the second half of the series. Aki was turned into a literal bench warmer save for one match, while the writers essentially had her be a sacrificial lamb for Yusei to look good. The twins were basically know-nothings until the very end. Jack was turned to a comedy relief character. Fuck you, Crow! And if I ever get the chance to cover the male characters or the problems in general with the various Yu-Gi-Oh series, I'll definitely bring this up. You wanna know what the big problem was? Well, Takahashi, the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh, was limiting his involvement with the anime since at the end of Duel Monsters, he did contribute a ton of designs and was persuaded to join with 5Ds. This was stated in the 21st Bunkodan. However, if anyone knows anything about Takahashi's involvement with Yu-Gi-Oh, you know he almost killed himself while he was drawing Zord. Then again, with the snake penis, I don't really blame him for that. During the Dark Signer arc, Takahashi decided to step down from the creative position that he was in. He gave the reins to a new team of writers, most notably Katsumo Omo, who, if you can glean from the Yu-Gi-Oh 5D's arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, had the biggest man crush on Crow Hogan, to the point where Crow was turned into a main character. Again! So, you wanna know why 5D's writing, and not just the girls, got so bad? It's because Takahashi jumped ship. I'm not saying 5D's second half is a trash fire. The second half has probably some of the most iconic and fun duels in it. Hell, the Clear Mind scene in the second half is probably one of, if not the most important and my favorite scenes in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially the Japanese version when you got Masaki Endo's Clear Mind blurring out and watching Shooting Star Dragon deliver 5 simultaneous attacks at once. That's badass! And do I need to bring up the amazing Team Taiyo? Team Taiyo! Fuck Kids with a rusty spoon for cutting those episodes! What was I talking about? Oh, right. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds has its problem, and Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole has a terrible track record for its female characters especially. Yeah, you can say that there are a lot of problems with the male characters that the female characters do as well, but on the whole, most of the male characters get off relatively light in comparison. Oh well, next time we're putting on a D-gazer and talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, the series where everything decided to go much younger, and did it in the most creepy way possible. Ugh. I'm Manga Common. Thanks for watching. God, I don't want to do Zexal.